The sheriff's deputy had the decency to look uncomfortable. He stood on the porch of my grandfather's cabin, a place I had considered the safest on earth, and handed me a thick, terrifyingly official-looking document. It was a court-ordered notice of ejectment, an eviction notice. For my own home. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice a low monotone. "The court's granted a temporary order. You'll have to vacate the premises pending the hearing." Behind him, on the gravel path, stood Victoria, the president of the Aspen Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated triumph. Yes, she had done it. She had weaponized the law, twisted the truth, and was now on the verge of throwing me, a man she believed to be a lowly squatter, out of my own family's cabin. "The locks will be changed in 1 hour," she announced, her voice ringing with the finality of a death sentence. "I suggest you gather whatever personal belongings you can carry. The rest will be disposed of as abandoned property." My mind went completely, terrifyingly blank. The legal document in my hand felt impossibly heavy. The deputy's polite words, Victoria's venomous ones, they all swirled into a vortex of sound that seemed to be dragging me under. Being evicted from my own home, on my own land? They had one. And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. To understand that eviction notice, you have to understand the valley. My name is Arthur Vance. And until 6 months ago, my life was a quiet, anonymous one. I was a software architect in Silicon Valley, a world of code, deadlines, and digital noise. My grandfather, on the other hand, was a titan, a man who had built an empire in mining and timber in the last century, but his real passion wasn't his business. It was the land. Decades ago, he began to quietly, methodically, buy up an entire valley in the mountains of Colorado. Not for development, not for profit, but for preservation. He bought the mountains. The river that ran through them, the forests, the meadows, 20,000 acres of pristine, untouched wilderness. It was his personal Yellowstone. When he passed away last year at the age of 98, he left it all to me. Not in a simple will, but in a complex family trust, with a mountain of legal documents, survey maps, and responsibilities. His only heir, the unassuming tech-nerd grandson he had tasked with being the steward of his life's greatest work. I was overwhelmed, quit my job, left the city, and moved into his old hunting cabin, a simple, rustic, beautiful log structure. On the valley floor, to try and get my head around what I had just inherited, I didn't change my clothes, my truck, or my quiet, introverted nature. I was just Arthur, the guy in the old cabin. The one piece of the valley my grandfather hadn't owned was a 500-acre parcel. He had sold off to a developer back. In the 1990s, that parcel had become Aspen Ridge Estates, an ultra-exclusive gated community of gaudy mega mansions. It was an island of manicured artificial perfection in the middle of my vast wild domain. And the undisputed ruler of this island was its HOA president, Victoria. Victoria was a woman who radiated the kind of aggressive, brittle confidence that comes from new money and a deep-seated insecurity. She drove a brand-new electric Rolls-Royce SUV and wore clothes that probably cost more than my truck. Her entire world was a carefully curated Instagram feed, and anything that didn't fit her aesthetic was a threat. Our first meeting was a perfect encapsulation of our entire future relationship. She drove up to my cabin, the electric silence of her car, an alien presence in the woods. She didn't get out. She just lowered the tinted window and looked me up and down as I was chopping firewood. My face unshaven, my clothes covered in sawdust. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescending pity one might use on a stray dog. "I'm Victoria, the president of the association. Are you the new caretaker for this property?" Something like that, I said. "I'm Arthur, the owner." She blinked, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raising a fraction of an inch. "Owner, really? Well, you should know that the association has plans for this derelict old structure. We find it to be a significant blight on the valley's natural beauty. We'll be in touch." She raised her window and glided away, leaving me in a cloud of dust and disbelief. She thought my grandfather's beautiful historic cabin was a derelict structure, and she had plans for it. I had no idea how serious she was. A week later, the first formal assault began. I received a thick, creamy envelope via a courier. Inside was a letter from the Aspen Ridge HOA. It was a formal declaration, written by her lawyers, declaring my cabin a public nuisance and a severe violation of the community's aesthetic covenants. It was absurd. My cabin wasn't even in her community. The letter demanded that I either submit plans for its complete demolition within 30 days, or, alternatively, submit a full architectural and landscaping plan for a gut renovation that would bring the property in line with the modern luxury standards of Aspen Ridge. I was initially more amused than angry. The sheer arrogance of it was almost comical. It had no jurisdiction, no authority, no power over me or my property whatsoever. I had my own lawyer, the one who managed my grandfather's trust, send a polite, simple, and legally unambiguous letter back, informing them that my parcel was not, and never had been, a part of their HOA, and that they should kindly direct their future correspondence to the inside of a trash can. I thought that would be the end of it. How wrong I was. For a person like Victoria, being told no is not an answer. It's a declaration of war. Her response was to double down with a move of such stunning, illegal audacity that I couldn't believe it was real. Another letter arrived. This one informed me that the HOA board, in an emergency session, had voted unanimously to retroactively annex my property into the association, for the purpose of ensuring community safety, security, and aesthetic cohesion, citing a completely fabricated clause in the original development plan. They had, with a stroke of a pen in their ridiculous clubhouse, simply decided that my property was now theirs to control. The harassment became a daily affair after that. I'd come home to find bright orange HOA violation stickers plastered on the historic windows of my cabin for unapproved, non-thermally insulated window frames, another sticker on the logs themselves for natural, unpainted wood siding. They started sending me bills for daily fines, for the annexation fee, for landscaping non-compliance. The mail became a daily delivery of professionally printed insults. My amusement had long since curdled into a cold, simmering anger. The sheer relentless entitlement was staggering. I documented everything. I took pictures of the stickers. I saved every threatening letter, every bill. My lawyers sent another, more forceful letter warning them that their actions constituted illegal harassment and that if they did not cease and desist, we would pursue legal action. Victoria's response was to escalate from paper to people. I came home one afternoon to find a construction crew on my property. They were unloading fencing materials. An enormous pile of prefabricated white vinyl privacy fencing. The foreman, a tired-looking man, showed me the work order. It was from the HOA. The job was to erect an 8-foot-high privacy and beautification fence around the entire perimeter of my cabin, effectively hiding my derelict structure from the view of the main road. I lost my temper. "This is my private property?" I told the foreman, my voice shaking with rage. I pulled up the county survey map on my phone and showed him the clear property lines. "You are trespassing. If you unload one more panel of that fence, I am calling the sheriff and having you and your entire crew arrested." The foreman, seeing the look in my eye and the undeniable proof on my phone, wisely packed up his crew and left. But not before Victoria came screeching up in her Rolls Royce. She burst out of the car, her face a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. "You cannot interfere with an official HOA project. This is not HOA property, Victoria. This is my land. For the last time, leave me alone. You will regret this," she screamed as I walked back to my cabin and slammed the door. "I will have you removed. I will have this shack torn down. I will be back with a court order." I should have taken her threat more seriously. I had no idea the lengths she would go to, the lies she would tell. Her lawyers, armed with a series of half-truths, misrepresentations, and photographs of the dilapidated cabin, went to a judge. He didn't mention that I was the owner. They didn't mention the property's legal status. They painted a picture of an abandoned, unsafe structure that had been occupied by an unidentified and unauthorized individual me. They claimed the HOA, as the governing body of the area, was simply trying to secure a dangerous property. And a busy judge, looking at the case for all of 5 minutes, signed an ex parte temporary order of EJEC2 men. And that's how I ended. Up on my own porch, with a sheriff's deputy handing me a legal document that ordered me to leave my own home. This was the ultimate violation. The system, the very laws meant to protect property owners, had been twisted and manipulated against me. In that moment, standing there with the eviction notice in my hand and Victoria's triumphant smirk burning into my retinas, I felt a profound sense of powerlessness. It felt like she had truly, completely won. I looked at the deputy. Looked. At the eviction notice, I looked at Victoria, who was practically vibrating with the joy of her victory, and I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't protest. My anger had become something else entirely. It was a cold, quiet, and absolute certainty. You have made a terrible, terrible mistake, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Then I took out my phone. I didn't call my lawyer. Had a different number on my speed dial. One press. It rang twice. Hello? A gruff voice answered. Double quotes, hi, Bill. It's Arthur Vance, I said calmly. Yes, from the Aspen Valley Trust. I need you to do 2 things. For me, first call the manager at the Granite Peak Quarry. Tell him I need a delivery. 20 tons of 3-inch gravel. I need it in 1 hour. Second, I need you to go to the main gate. The Valley Road gate. Effective immediately. No one in or out without my personal authorization. A long pause. Is everything all right, Mr. Vance? Bill, my head of security, asked. Everything is fine, Bill, I said, my eyes locked on Victoria's. I'm just revoking some privileges. I hung up the phone. Victoria just scoffed. Who was that? Your imaginary friend? The clock is ticking, Arthur. You have 55 minutes. She had no idea what I had just done. She and everyone in her precious little community lived in a bubble. They drove through my valley, on my road, and had no idea it was all mine. The main highway was 5 miles away. Between that highway and the grand, stone and iron entrance to their gated community was a stretch of pristine, 2-lane asphalt known as Valley Road. It was the only way in, the only way out. And they had always assumed it was a public county road. It wasn't. It was the private driveway to my family's estate. An estate they just happened to be living in the middle of. The sheriff's deputy was starting to look impatient. And then his radio crackled to life. It was dispatch. The voice was frantic. Unit 7, what's your 20? We're getting a dozen calls. The main access road to Aspen Ridge, Valley Road, is completely blocked. A security team has locked the main gate, and a dump truck is blocking the entire road with a load of gravel. No one can get in or out. Can you advise? The deputy's eyes went wide. He stared at me. He looked at his radio, looked back at me, a dawning, horrified comprehension. On his face, Victoria's smug expression had vanished, replaced by a mask of confusion. What? What's going on? That's impossible. That's a county road. No, Victoria, I said, my voice cold as the mountain air. It's not. This was the moment. The beautiful, terrible, glorious moment I had been trying my whole life to avoid, but that she had forced upon me. You seem to be confused about the nature of power in this valley, I said. You think your little HOA, your little binder of rules, is the authority here? You own a few dozen houses on a few hundred acres of land that my family sold off a generation ago. My family trust, I said, letting the words hang in the air, owns the other 20,000 acres. We own the mountains you use in your marketing brochures. We own the river you stock with trout for your fishing tournaments. And yes, Victoria, we own the road. The only road. You don't have a right to use it. You have a limited access easement. A privilege my grandfather granted your developer. Privilege that your campaign of illegal harassment and your fraudulent bad faith eviction attempt has just given me cause to terminate for a full safety and security review. I pulled out my own wallet and showed the stunned deputy the laminated card that identified me as the managing trustee of the Aspen Valley Preservation Trust, the legal entity that owned almost everything as far as the eye could see. The deputy looked from the ID to my face, then to the eviction notice he had just served me, and he looked like he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. Victoria's world was visibly collapsing. Her face, which had been a mask of triumph, was now a crumbling ruin of disbelief and terror. You can't," she stammered. "I can," I said, "and I have." The entire community was sealed off from the outside world.
Oh, way no one could.
Get to work. No one could get home. Deliveries stopped. The school bus was stranded. The bubble had been popped. The deputy was now a prisoner, along with the rest of them. The uproar was instantaneous and magnificent. Victoria was no longer a powerful president. She was the woman who had gotten them all trapped. She was besieged in her own home by furious neighbors, their $500,000 SUVs now useless trinkets in their driveways. The next day, a team of high-powered corporate lawyers from Denver, representing the developer who had built Aspen Ridge, demanded a meeting. We met at the blockade. They were full of bluster and threats about lawsuits. My lawyer just smiled and presented them with the original deeds and the access easement agreement. He pointed out the clause that allowed the grantor to restrict access in the event of a legal dispute with the residents. Their bluster evaporated. They knew they had no case. I laid out my terms. They were not negotiable. 1. The Aspen Ridge Estates Homeowners Association was to be immediately and permanently dissolved, to be replaced by a simple road maintenance association on whose board my trust would hold a permanent controlling seat. 2. The fraudulent, illegal eviction order was to be publicly and humiliatingly withdrawn, and the HOA was to pay every cent of my legal fees. 3. Victoria was to issue a formal, public letter of apology for her campaign of harassment, and she was to sell her house and leave my valley within 6 months. And this was my favorite part, the Aspen Ridge Development Company was to make a substantial 7-figure non-negotiable donation to the Aspen Valley Wilderness Preservation Fund, the charitable fund my trust operated to maintain the beauty of the land she had tried to desecrate. They agreed to everything. They had no other choice. The road reopened the next day. The eviction order was vacated, and the dissolution of the HOA began. I stood on my porch, watching the sunset behind the mountains my grandfather had loved so much. The peace was finally real, earned through a battle I never wanted to fight. This whole ugly affair taught me a powerful lesson about the nature of wealth and power. There's the loud, flashy, fragile kind that builds big houses and writes petty rules. And then there's the quiet, deep, enduring kind that comes from the land itself. Victoria was so obsessed with controlling her tiny, manicured corner of the world, she never bothered to look at a map to see who owned everything else. She thought she was an empress in her palace, but she was just a guest in my garden. She had finally, spectacularly worn out her welcome. The HOA is gone. Victoria's mansion is on the market with a massive price cut. But I just got a call from a state senator's office. He's a friend of Victoria's husband, who's inquiring about the significant public interest in the state acquiring the Valley Road for a proposed scenic highway project.